Have you ever stopped to wonder how the choices we make ripple through our lives and the world around us? In today's story, we'll explore tales that challenge the way we see our relationship with nature. From a fisherman whose passion leads to unforeseen consequences to a family facing unimaginable events, these stories reveal the intricate dance between human actions and the forces of karma. Prepare to reflect, learn, and perhaps even change the way you see the world. Let's dive in. The story, the passion of fishing. Fishing is an extremely cruel activity. Just imagine, if a sharp hook were to pierce through your lips or tongue, you would feel pain so excruciating it would reach your very heart and lungs. In other words, it's a kind of agony no one could possibly endure. Yet, many people take fishing as a form of entertainment, tirelessly casting lines for hours on end. Some even establish fishing clubs. While fishing is often seen as a leisurely activity, it's worth considering the perspective of the creatures involved and approaching it with mindfulness. Lam Jayapchien, a government official in Thailand, was particularly fond of fishing. He was a devoted member of a fishing club. On weekends, he often took his boat out to sea, fishing while sipping fine wine and savoring delicious food. For him, it was pure bliss. Fellow members of the club enjoyed fresh fish and fine drinks, relishing the pleasures of life together. A few years ago, when the club was first established, it was lively and bustling. But starting last year, the number of members dropped from 30 to just 7 or 8. The club now carried an air of desolation, leaving members unmotivated to go out fishing. Despite Lam Jayapchien being a stubborn man who didn't believe in karma or retribution, a man without family or faith, even he couldn't reignite the enthusiasm among the remaining members. The decline was attributed to two strange incidents that occurred. The first incident involved an older club member named Aban. One Sunday, Aban and his wife went to his mother-in-law's house to celebrate her birthday. His mother-in-law was a well-known figure in the area, and many guests filled the house for the occasion. The banquet was grand, featuring an abundance of dishes: beef, pork, fish, chicken, duck, and goose. Guests enjoyed themselves to their heart's content, but there was still plenty of food left. Aban, who had a special love for fish and its flavorful parts, was excited to see a large fish served on the table. As he enjoyed his meal, he took a bite of the fish without chewing thoroughly, which caused some discomfort in his throat. Despite his efforts to address the issue, he found it difficult to swallow or resolve the situation on his own. Noticing that something wasn't right, his younger brother quickly stepped in to help. Understanding the urgency, they immediately took Aban to the hospital to ensure he could receive proper care. Sadly, despite their swift actions, Aban could not recover. Although he was already passed away, the hospital performed surgery to identify the cause. Doctors removed the fish's entrails lodged in his throat, only to discover something shocking. The fatal object was a fish hook, firmly embedded in the fish's entrails. The hook had been forced out as Aban swallowed, and the more he tried to pull, the deeper it embedded itself. Everyone present, doctors, nurses, and witnesses, was left dumbfounded. They stared in horror at the bloodied fishhook. It was impossible not to draw a connection between Aban's passion for fishing and this incident. Aban had been known for his exceptional fishing skills, admired by all club members. When others couldn't catch anything, he would always bring home an impressive haul. Now, the tragic scene served as a reminder to everyone of the unexpected consequences of our actions. The moment was a poignant reminder of karma. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. The haunting scene left no doubt that karma was real, as unshakable as a shadow following its source. This was a chilling and undeniable lesson. The second incident was even more bizarre. Another club member, Duong Yich, was a master angler who had won consecutive fishing championships. Besides his passion for fishing, Duong also enjoyed riding his electric bicycle. Every evening, he would take his wife for a ride in the countryside to enjoy the breeze. One night, around 11 p.m., Duong was driving home after attending a friend's funeral. The road was so familiar to him that he could have navigated it with his eyes closed. But something inexplicable happened. he suddenly saw a massive river appear before him. Never before had there been a river on that road. Startled, he swerved and braked sharply to avoid plunging into the water. With a loud bang, his vehicle crashed straight into a roadside utility pole. When he woke up, he found himself in the hospital. At first, people thought the accident was caused by speeding, but the real mystery lay in Duong's injuries. Although his body healed quickly, his lips and mouth suffered severe damage. His teeth had all fallen out, leaving him unable to eat anything. For over a month, he survived solely on liquid food fed through a tube. Even stranger were the wounds at the corners of his lips. Doctors had stitched them 7 times, but the wounds wouldn't close. Each time the stitches were removed, his lips would ulcerate and swell again. Eventually, the doctors used cutting-edge chemical threads to sew the wounds shut, but even those dissolved after a week, leaving his lips perpetually split open, much like the mouth of a fish caught on a hook. One day, during a visit, his wife couldn't help but remark, "Oh my, your mouth looks just like a fish caught on a hook." Her words struck a nerve. They reminded Duong of the countless times he had torn fishes' mouths while reeling them in. For the first time, he truly empathized with the pain he had inflicted on those creatures. Deeply remorseful, he and his wife went to a temple, where he knelt before Buddha and sincerely repented. He vowed never to fish again. Miraculously, from that day forward, his lips began to heal. Within a week, he was discharged from the hospital. He shared his story with other club members, urging them to quit fishing as well. The dissolution of the fishing club. Following these 2 eerie incidents, many members of the fishing club gave up fishing altogether. Attendance dwindled significantly, and not long after, Lam Gyapshin himself abandoned the hobby. Eventually, the fishing club disbanded entirely. The story: a unique dish. In a rural village in eastern Thailand, there was a farmer named Abin, whose wife had given birth to 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The eldest, Bo, was 9 years old, followed by Hong, who was 7, and their youngest sister, Bok, who was 5. One day, Abin and his wife attended a ceremony at a relative's house, leaving the 3 children at home. Their home was a traditional Thai wooden house, built on stilts. Nearby, there was a pile of dry straw, a cross-shaped rainwater gutter, and several large clay jars used to store drinking water. The houses in the village were scattered across vast fields, with significant distances between neighbors. That day, the wooden house suddenly caught fire. Neighbors, far away, could only see thick black smoke rising high into the sky. By the time they arrived, the house was engulfed in flames, and the dry straw nearby had also ignited. The entire wooden structure was reduced to ashes in no time. Tragically, the 3 children were trapped inside the locked house. Bo, thinking quickly, tried to protect his younger siblings, believing that water could shield them from the flames. He carried each of his siblings and placed them into 2 large water jars, covering the lids. Finally, he climbed into another jar himself. By the time neighbors and firefighters reached the scene, the house and straw piles were completely burned down. A cow tied nearby had also perished. Since there was no trace of the children, everyone assumed they had escaped and fled to safety. When Abin and his wife returned, they were frantic and searched for their children until late at night, but to no avail. The following morning, a relative named Luan Bao arrived to help. As if guided by a sudden intuition, Luan Bao hurried to the water jars. When he opened the first one, he discovered Bo, the eldest child, and was deeply moved. Hearing his call, Abin and his wife quickly came over. Together, they opened the remaining jars and found Hong and Bok. Overwhelmed with emotion, Abin and his wife held each other, processing the unexpected loss of their beloved children. The heartbreaking tragedy was widely reported by newspapers and television stations. During an interview, a reporter asked Luan Bao how he knew to check the jars. Luan Bao explained, "That night, as the fire raged, I was asleep at home. In my dream, I saw people frantically searching for the children. Suddenly, an old man with a long white beard appeared and told me, 'The fish are in the water jars.' When I woke up, the dream felt so vivid that I rushed to check the jars. And sadly, that's where I found them." Upon hearing this, Abin cried out in anguish and fainted. When he regained consciousness, his eyes were hollow, staring blankly at his children's tragedy, and he murmured, "Karma, it's karma." Everyone assumed his grief had clouded his mind and dared not question him further. In keeping with rural traditions, neighbors came together to help them. Having lost all three of their beloved children in a single day, and with their home and possessions reduced to ashes, Abin and his wife decided to move temporarily to another place. Overwhelmed by their tragedy, they soon sought solace in spirituality and chose to leave the world behind to pursue a monastic life. Although many sympathized with their loss, they couldn't help but wonder why Abin repeatedly spoke of karma. Abin was known as a kind and hard-working farmer. What could he have done to deserve such a fate? Only his brother-in-law, Avu, knew the answer. Avu explained, Abin was a good man, always keeping peace and helping others. However, he had one habit, his love for unique and delicious food. He was especially proud of a dish he created called stuffed vegetables with fish. I often opposed it, but he wouldn't listen. In this region of Thailand, rich with rice and fish, spring rains would bring a season when fish laid their eggs. Soon, the tiny fish grew to the size of chopsticks. Abin would craft a fine net to catch them. Sometimes he caught a dozen, other times hundreds. He would place the fish in a water container and prepare them for his dish. He hollowed out large vegetable stems, cut them into tubes, and filled a pot with cold water, adding the vegetables and live fish. He would simmer the pot over a low flame. As the water gradually warmed, the fish would instinctively swim into the hollow stems to escape the heat, unknowingly sealing their fate. Some people who saw the fish felt compassion, noting the importance of treating all living beings kindly. However, Abin focused on his culinary creation, taking pride in the uniqueness of his dish. Each vegetable tube is perfectly filled, he would say, enjoying the result of his efforts. One day, while fishing in the fields, Abin netted a large school of baby fish. Suddenly, two large fish, presumably the parents, leaped onto the bank, seemingly in desperation after witnessing their young taken away. Abin, blinded by his desires, ignored their sacrifice and took them home for meal. As humans, we often forget the suffering we inflict on other living beings. Only when tragedy strikes our own families do we feel the depth of pain and sorrow. An ancient poet once wrote, "For centuries, in bowls of soup and stew, the ocean of tears has boiled anew. Think twice of karma's unseen hand, for life's cycle spares no land." This story serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of our actions. May it inspire reflection, compassion, and a reduction in the harm we cause to all living beings. The story, The Fish That Caught Humans. In a remote highland district of Thailand, there was a small county hospital. Due to the region's difficult terrain, patients often had to set out at the crack of dawn to get medical care and return home before nightfall. One quiet Sunday afternoon, after all the patients had been seen, the hospital staff were enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. Suddenly, a nurse rushed to the director with urgency. "Doctor, there's an emergency. A man has a fish bone stuck in his throat. Please come quickly." The patient was a young man in his early 20s. He was no longer breathing, though his body was still warm, and his face bore an expression of profound pain and terror. His family and friends explained that he had stopped breathing on the way to the hospital, though it was clear he had passed away. Protocol required an autopsy to confirm the cause of death and issue a death certificate. As the doctor prepared, the family recounted the events leading to the young man's tragic death. The young man, named Thin, had joined his friends early that morning to fish in the waterlogged fields after a heavy rainstorm. The flooded fields were teeming with fish, and the group had caught plenty. Thin managed to catch a mountain carp, a small, golden-scaled fish native to the area. Moments later, he spotted a larger fish, a carp, within reach. Excited, he stepped forward to grab it, but realized he had no place to put the smaller fish already in his hand. Without thinking, he decided to hold it in his mouth temporarily. To his horror, the fish wriggled free and slid down his throat, lodging itself firmly in his airway. The mountain carp, though small, only 2 to 3 inches long, is known for its tough, sharp scales. When stroked in one direction, its body feels smooth, but in the opposite direction, its scales act like hooks, gripping tightly. As Thin tried to pull the fish out, the hooked scales only dug deeper, causing him painful. To make matters worse, this type of fish is incredibly hardy and can survive for extended periods out of water, even climbing rocky terrain, hence its name. Within moments, Thin began to experience difficulty breathing. He couldn't swallow or speak and pointed to his throat to indicate he needed help. His friends quickly came to his aid, trying to assist him, but despite their best efforts, they were unable to resolve the situation. Thin became unresponsive, and his friends immediately sought further help to ensure he received care. They quickly flagged down a taxi to take him to the hospital, but Thin stopped breathing before they could arrive. At the hospital, the doctor performed the autopsy and removed the fish from Thin's throat. It was still alive. With a touch of dark humor, a nurse released the fish into a pond outside the hospital, saying, "If the police were investigating, this would be the prime suspect. Go hide yourself, little one." Thin's body was returned to his family for burial. In accordance with Thai tradition, his funeral was scheduled for 7 days later, culminating in a cremation ceremony. The sudden and tragic loss of such a young life left many in the community grieving. However, on the very morning of Thin's cremation, shocking news spread throughout the village. Another person had died from choking on a mountain carp. Even more astonishingly, it was Thin's father, Mr. Tang. Like his son, Mr. Tang had been preparing for a day of fishing in the flooded fields, wanting to prepare a feast for the guests attending the funeral. He rose early and began scooping fish into a basket. As he worked, he called out to his wife to bring a larger container. The next moments were surreal. Just as he opened his mouth to shout, a mountain carp leapt from the water, landing directly in his mouth. Panicked, Mr. Tang instinctively tried to spit it out and pull it free, but the fish lodged itself firmly in his throat, just as it had with his son. By the time neighbors pulled him from the water and rushed him toward the hospital, he had already passed away. The eerie similarity of the father and son's deaths sent shockwaves through the community, spreading rapidly from village to county to the entire province. Within a single week, the same hospital had handled 2 identical and inexplicable tragedies within the same family. The hospital director personally visited the grieving family to offer condolences and to investigate what could have caused such a bizarre series of events. He discovered that fishing had been a way of life for the family for generations. During the off-season, they supplemented their income by catching and preserving fish. The family had a traditional method of preserving fish, a practice passed down through generations, which inspired reflection on the importance of treating all creatures with compassion. Each skewer could hold several fish, which were then dried or smoked for sale. This practice had been passed down through generations, from Thin's great-grandfather to his father, and eventually to Thin. Some villagers occasionally reflected on the process, noting the importance of treating all creatures with kindness. In light of the recent events, many began to see the situation as a reminder of the interconnectedness of life and the effects of one's actions. As Buddhist teachings often remind us, the law of cause and effect applies universally. The family's story became a reminder for the community to reflect on their actions and embrace compassion in their daily lives. Let this story serve as a reminder to be mindful of our actions and to avoid causing harm. For the seeds of cruelty we sow may one day return to us in ways we least expect. The story, a life lesson in kindness. At a small hospital in a district of Thailand, the director, who was also a practicing surgeon, once shared a story about a unique medical case that left a profound impact on all who heard it. The story highlighted the importance of compassion and how our actions may have deeper consequences than we realize. The director recounted, "In all my years as a doctor, I had never encountered a case as unusual as this. One patient underwent surgery 5 times in 3 years, with each operation becoming more severe. Eventually, his condition required the amputation of an arm and a leg, leaving him with only one hand and one leg. The patient, a man named Van Lai, initially sought treatment after being bitten on the pinky finger by a softshell turtle. At first, the injury seemed minor and was treated with basic wound care. However, within 2 weeks, the area became swollen and infected. Doctors determined that to prevent further complications, surgery was needed to address his condition. Less than 6 months later, while on a trip to the beach, Van Lai had another unfortunate encounter. This time, a turtle bit his pinky toe. Once again, the injury became infected, and doctors had to amputate the toe to save his foot. Over the following year, both the previously injured finger and toe began to show signs of inflammation and swelling again. Concerned, Van Lai returned to the hospital, where an X-ray revealed that the infection had worsened. The medical team determined that to prevent further health risks, they needed to amputate his entire hand and foot. This sequence of events left the community baffled, with many regarding his situation as extraordinary and deeply unfortunate. Yet, the story did not end there. One day, Van Lai attended a Buddhist ordination ceremony for a friend's son. As the event started in the early morning, many participants stayed overnight at the temple, sleeping in a shared hall near the main shrine. Among the 40 or 50 people gathered, a small but peculiar incident occurred. A mouse scurried into the hall and, out of all the sleeping attendees, bit the area near Van Lai's amputated leg. Though the bite was minor and caused only a small scratch, it sparked hushed conversations among the group. Some speculated that the incident was symbolic, prompting Van Lai to feel uneasy and anxious about his future. Still troubled by the incident and experiencing discomfort near his previous surgical wounds, Van Lai returned to the hospital for another checkup. X-rays revealed that both the old injuries on his hand and leg had become severely infected again, this time forming tumors. The only solution, doctors advised, was to amputate his arm and leg further to save his life. Reflecting on these events, the hospital director grew curious about Van Lai's life and circumstances. Through careful investigation, he uncovered a deeper story that shed light on the possible reasons for Van Lai's recurring misfortunes. Van Lai, 43, was a farmer and part-time construction worker. He had a love for good food and frequently enjoyed river fish and turtles. He believed in a local myth that eating turtles regularly could bring health benefits and prevent certain illnesses. Over the past 2 decades, he had frequently enjoyed preparing turtle dishes as part of his meals, often serving them alongside his favorite rice wine. One day, he purchased an unusually large softshell turtle at the market, weighing over 20 pounds. Van Lai devised a method he believed would keep the meat fresh for longer, though some friends and neighbors encouraged him to consider more humane alternatives. Over the years, he often praised the freshness of the meals he prepared, viewing his approach as practical. Despite encouragement from friends and neighbors to consider more mindful and compassionate methods, he continued with his practices, reflecting his belief in traditional ways. "I can't be bothered with such superstitions," he would say, dismissing everyone's concerns. However, as Van Lai faced the repeated amputations and physical challenges that followed, he began to reflect on his actions and realized the importance of treating all living beings with kindness. Seeing his experience as an opportunity to change, a lesson in the consequences of causing unnecessary harm to living beings, the hospital director, deeply moved by the story, summarized his thoughts. Some things in life defy scientific explanation, and perhaps this is one of those instances. It serves as a powerful reminder to approach all living beings with compassion and to consider the impact of our actions on the world around us. The story of Van Lai became a source of reflection for many, inspiring kindness, mindfulness, and a deeper understanding of how our choices shape our lives. These stories remind us of a timeless truth. Every action we take has a ripple effect, whether it's our treatment of animals, our passions, or the way we interact with the world. Our choices shape our destiny. Karma is not just a concept, it's a reflection of our interconnectedness with all living beings. As you go about your day, take a moment to consider the impact of your actions. Together, we can create a world rooted in compassion and mindfulness. Thank you for watching, and let us know in the comments, what does karma mean to you? If you enjoyed this video, Don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. And make sure to subscribe to our channel and tap the bell notification so you never miss an inspiring story like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.